Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Deep Cut. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. I dropped my notes and they all got mixed up. Let's backtrack. I'm Wilson Lai.
I'm Eli Sands.
I'm Benjamin Yap.
And I'm Ryan Swen.
And you're listening to Deep Cut.
On Deep Cut, we compare a director's most popular film with a personal favorite chosen by one of us.
We also discuss that director's life and career to bring in context that helps us view their movies as they may want us to.
If you're enjoying the show, please rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to help others discover the show. Better still, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or comment on episodes directly on Spotify. You can also find us at deepcutpod.com to find links to our socials, Discord, and Patreon.
Welcome to another edition in our series on the works of Korean auteur Sang-soo and his 2014 feature, Hill of Freedom. If this is your first episode, we've previously covered many, also just a fraction of Hong's other films: Woman on the Beach, episode 104, Night and Day, 105, On the Beach at Night Alone, coming out soon, at the point of this recording, Yourself and Yours, and the Novelist film. And you can check out all of that on our podcast feed.
On today's episode, we have a really, really special guest who has chosen a Hong film to talk about on this episode. Ryan Swen is a LA-based freelance film critic, a member of LAFCA, the Los Angeles Film Critics Association, and the Douglas Edwards Experimental Independent Film Video Award Committee. He has written for Reverse Shot, Film Comment, Variety, Criterion, Sight and Sound, Slant Magazine, the BFI, Filmmaker Magazine, Movie Notebook, The Film Stage, Seattle Screen Scene, Hyperallergic, Screen Slate, the International Documentary Association, the Metrograph Journal, and In Review Online. It's a long list. Ryan also hosts the podcast Catalyst and Witness, where you can catch him talking about the New York Film Festival, which just happened a couple months ago as of our recording right now, and will have happened like half a year ago by the time this episode comes out.
Which means it's also coming up again soon.
Yes. He also serves as a Q&A moderator, having conducted conversations with Simon Liang, James Benning, Payal Kapadia, Wang Bing, Matias Pinheiro, and a DC favorite, Kurosawa Kiyoshi. With regards to Hong Sang-soo, you may have heard us mention Ryan's name on the podcast, and this is because Ryan is responsible for the Hong Sang-soo Notarized project, which was started in 2022. Ryan set out to do a full rewatch of director Hong's work, and with it, a detailed tabulation of his recurring motifs, devices, interests, and lengthy write-ups on each film. We've used Notarized on the podcast before to track different things in the Hong films we've covered, including but not limited to the number of zooms in the film, the types of alcohol the characters drank, what creative industries these characters work in, and many more. We are very delighted to have him in the podcast today to talk about a Hong pick of his. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. I did not know that you were going to read my entire, it's from my website. So, I mean, so I wanted to be thorough on that, but there's no,
Yes.
You can cut that down as much as you like. It's totally fine. No,
It's
I mean, I'm happy about all the places I've written, but don't need to talk about all of them. But thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to be on this and for citing me as a source.
Ryan, what brings you here, business or pleasure?
I'm here to see some folks.
Oh,
yes.
Good answer.
I would love to start off our conversation with you today to ask about your relationship to director Hong and how you got into his films and what made you decide to kickstart this Notarized project.
Yeah, sure. Without any sugarcoating needed, Hong for me is the greatest living filmmaker.
Wow.
Greatest working filmmaker, I should say. There's still maybe a few others, like Wong Kar-wai or these filmmakers who have the same sort of stature in my mind, and I love them equally. But in terms of filmmakers working film after film, year after year, he epitomizes everything that I adore about cinema. And for me, I guess it's been 9 years now, which is, it feels like a good long while, but still for his pace especially, it's even longer than that, but also it doesn't sound quite right, whatever that means. Right around my birthday in 2016 was the first time I watched his films. It was directly because of 2015, 2016 were really the years I was first getting into film, especially new film. And I had heard a lot about Right Now, Wrong Then. And so I resolved, because I had Fandor at the time, to watch the films that were on the service, which were The Day He Arrives, Another Country, and the Right Now, Wrong Then, which I watched succession over 3 days. And that stretch I immediately was interested in his films. I think The Day He Arrives, I think all of them, of course, have grown for me a great deal, especially Day He Arrives, and in other countries to a strong extent as well. The thing that jumped out to me most was just his sense of form, or his sense of specifically trying to capture a different form of conversation, a different rhythms, different way in which it was integrated into a narrative. And it took a while after that for me to, even though I was I was watching the films after that and then already had this interest in, but it wasn't really until Yourself and Yours, which was, I believe, the 7th one I saw. I saw that in Seattle, the Seattle International Film Festival. I was living in Seattle at the time where I first got started. And it's one of the great viewing experiences for me, specifically because it was the first one I had seen in theater, but it taught me about how a reception of him can alter and change based on a viewing circumstance. Because I was sitting in the same row as a guy 4 or 5 seats away from me. After a certain point, he was just rocking in his chair because he just could not understand what he was watching. He seemed like very, very fed up. And I think that that sort of experience, it sort of unlocked a little bit of something for me. My favorite film of his, I put it on my Silent Out ballot. Sometimes it just might flat out be my favorite film.
Wow.
In terms of the Notarized project, that is actually, if I had to pick one piece of writing that's my favorite ever piece of writing that I've done, it's probably that. I think that Hong, for me, and this is maybe something that we can also get into at some point, I think that one of the many things I treasure about him is that many of my greatest influences in terms of fellow critics, fellow cinephiles, friends, has come from Hong specifically. Not just because of him, but he's a focal point of some of the most central relationships I formed. Of course, my 2 fellow Seattle compatriots, Evan Morgan, Sean Gilman, who I wrote the liner notes for Nobody's Daughter Hae-won in the Cinema Guild box set that included Oki's movie and Our Sumi, and Sean and Evan wrote in that. And I've had so many chances and so many pleasurable moments of discussing his work with them specifically. And I find that Hong, for me, partly because he's such a part of the firmament of the festival landscape, is a topic that comes up a lot with many of my closest friends, my closest film friends, and of course, a lot of my great influences, whether it be Dennis Lim, obviously, or members of CinemaScope, Jordan Cronk, my compatriot here in LA. I find that just Hong, for me, is, in addition to being the greatest working director, is also, he's inextricable from my participation, my ongoing, odd, still kind of unbelievable participation in the current, in my status as a critic. I think that even though most critics still, I feel like increasingly actually now at this point, are not necessarily as in tune with him or focusing on him, I think that still he remains such a central part of why I am a critic.
And it sounds like a part of your community of colleagues and friends.
Yeah, definitely. I've actually kind of appreciated his most recent period partly because it's sort of demonstrated that people can still feel differently, engage differently with his work. Another great influence, Dan Salit, he's not been as enamored of this more recent period. And I find that interesting, and a massive respect for him. Another friend of mine, Red Frost. These are people whose love of Hong helped me love Hong, and even if they're not feeling super hot on his recent period, like it's still interesting. It's another way of dissecting like how you feel about a director, how that informs your own film taste.
That's what I've really loved about our Hong conversations is we have all been approaching his filmography or the films themselves with very different opinions on them. And I think they've had led to like some really lively discussions about not only what the films mean, but like, I guess like whether they hold value for us personally or not. Yeah, and I'm sure today will be no different.
Yeah. You haven't been able to listen to Yourself and Yours episode, but that's also my favorite Hong film.
Oh, yeah.
When they screened the film in Singapore recently, I hosted like a post-screening discussion, and there was one guy, he was like, I just wanted to ask, what was that? He was also just like so confused by the film. And I was like, that is a great response because it's okay to be confused.
Right.
You know, especially for many of the people watching Yourself and Yours that day, that was their first Hong film, you know, which is both the most accessible point, but also the least characteristic of Hong in a lot of ways.
Interesting. I mean, like largely informed by the experience at SIF was, I've always regarded as one of his least accessible, but I think that like maybe that's not quite right.
I think it's very accessible because I think it's one of his more good-natured films.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah.
And like it's kind of like pleasant compared to his more maybe like acerbic, abrasive films, you know?
I think that like, just in terms of like what it's doing structurally, in terms of its approach to doubling, I think that can be a tricky nut to crack for people.
Yeah. I have my thesis about how it's a film written by a Hong in love.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's not talk about that right now. Let's move on.
Let's from one Hong to another.
Have you already recorded with Dennis, by the way? Or
Yeah, we have.
We talked the novelist film and it was pretty incredible.
Yeah. Was that the episode before this one?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Dennis is a hard act to follow in any setting.
No pressure at all.
Dennis is the greatest. And he you know, Hong would not be where he is without Dennis. And so,
it's true.
You know, I can't thank him for enough for that.
Dennis made him.
Okay, on to today's film, which is Hong's 2014 feature, Hill of Freedom, which is about a Japanese language teacher named Mori who arrives in Seoul to track down a woman he was once in love with. And when he cannot find her, he begins to write letters to her detailing his experiences in Korea. When this woman finally receives these letters, she accidentally drops them, messing up the order of Mori's story.
And losing at least one part of it.
Yeah.
Yes. Maybe a very important letter, or maybe not. Who knows? We can talk about it. I wanted to ask you, Ryan, why did you pick this film? What about this film did you really connect with?
If I remember correctly, I think I provided a list of a few of them.
Yes, you did. Yes.
And I think that the ones I think I all chose were middle period sort of films.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think the ones I picked are all ones that I consider like amongst masterpieces. This is certainly one of them. And I think that for me, and it's especially been highlighted by the work that he's done from 2020, you could push it back to 2018 onwards. It feels like a really distinct period for him. I think that for me, the run from Night and Day in 2008 to Grass in 2018 is one of the greatest runs of films that a director has ever had. I think that every single one of these sort of pushes his body of work in interesting directions. Each one is very distinctive to me. I mean, all of his films are distinctive. I think that people not wrongly sort of had them blurred together, but I think that because of just how much thought I've put into or how much I've thought about each one of these, there's a lot of evolution that happens within this period. But I think that there's such a great sense of place, such a great use of unconventional structure that is evident in this period. And you know, Hill of Freedom is, I think, one of the most extreme examples of that, for obvious reasons. These films, each of them in their own way, offer their own distinct distillation of what Hong is great at. So Hill of Freedom is certainly one of them.
That's great. I'm going to go first with second with my reactions or general thoughts on the movie. This is my second time watching The first time I watched it, I did enjoy it quite a bit, but I think this second watch really like clicked it into place for me. It sort of like does two things that Hong does really well perfectly in this film and sort of like gels both of them together, which doesn't really always happen. Like I feel like the really short runtime plus the like the narrative mixing that he does, like he sort of just does them both at top tier here, which is kind of crazy because to have so much narrative juggling and make it something very emotionally coherent for me, plus also doing it in such a short amount of time, is sort of like a magic trick of Hong's filmography. And I just really like how this makes me feel. Like, I think it is a very joyous Hong movie, like we were talking about Yourself and Yours, and like we were talking about Claire's Camera. I think it moves quite light on its feet, and that's something that I really love about it. I do love the way that it ends as well. I think is a very hopeful ending. Whichever route you choose to take with the endings or whichever ending you choose to believe in. And I do think I really enjoy Hong's films where he gets into language and communication between people from different countries. And I think this is one of the films where he like really started doing that. I guess this happens after In Another Country, right? So he is already starting to think about that, maybe all the way from Night and Day. But it's great to have like different people who don't really have a strong command of English, using English to communicate with each other. And I think it makes for very funny situations, but also really like poignant pieces of dialogue as well. I think this is like a really top tier Hong for me. I think it might land like a top 5 for me after this rewatch.
Yeah, I think it's in number 5 for me.
Wow.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, I would put it very high in my ranking as well, though the exercise of ranking Hong feels moot because they're so... My appreciation of any particular Hong depends on my knowledge of the others. But the ways in which that knowledge opens up Hill of Freedom for me is similarly to what you said, Wilson. Like I see threads running through it that I've seen elsewhere. The kind of crummy, lightly misogynist man, the artist figure, the sort of repeated situations that refract in different ways upon the characters, the messiness around indirect emotional communication, and above all, and this is the thing that sort of actually makes me think it's more of a sad movie than a happy one, is the character who is so stuck on wanting a particular thing, often from the past, like a past relationship, that he can't adjust to new information and potential new feelings in the present. And this felt like one of the more poignant meditations on that idea. And also, as you said, Wilson, an incredibly efficient and succinct meditation on that problem, often in Hong movies staged between men and women. So yeah, I really responded to this one. It's not a total downer, right? There's some of his best humor in this for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I came away at the very end feeling like a little like, I see.
You see. You see the light now.
Oh, I've been seeing it for a while with Hong. I just see it more and more each time.
This is a very funny Hong film to me. Not funny like haha funny, but funny as like when I think about it, it's like, interesting, because I don't think maybe if I want to rate the film or like rank the film in Hong's filmography, I don't think I feel that strongly about it in his filmography. And yet, this is the Hong man that I think feels most like myself.
Is it the mustache?
It's not the mustache. I'm gonna get into it right now. Okay, it's like ridiculous.
No, it's not the mustache. It's the hair.
It is ridiculous we're talking about this film today because like so many things from this film are like resonating with my life. Like the fact that I'm in a bathroom right now recording this episode is also one of those. And the fact that I've just spent a month in a foreign country thinking about a woman, which is also interesting. The fact that I'm like a little bit drunk right now is also really interesting. And like the worldview of Mori, this character, I resonate a lot with. Like that little scene he has with Yun Jong where he talks about looking at flowers and trees.
Yeah.
I was
I
like,
love that.
That is me. Like, am I also a man afraid of life? A little bit. But then when I look at a tree, I'm like, wow, that's nice. A tree also makes me fearless about life. It's like funny, like thinking about that and like how, like his name also Mori, like it could be like Mori, like forest.
Or Mori like Maury.
What?
Like Maury Povich.
Okay.
You are the father.
You are.
I don't know. I think so much of this film like feels weirdly resonant in like random ways for me right now that I think it speaks to the fact that Hong's very large body of work means that there's a chance that one of these things is gonna like tune into your frequency. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Totally. And like I forgot everything about this film. This is the second time I'm watching it, and I forgot everything about it except for the shuffle of the story. And I didn't realize watching it again today that it would have this strange resonance in so many like random, almost mundane ways that there's something very truthful about the film that like despite the awkwardness of all of them speaking in English, there is a core kernel of truth to the feelings that Mori and like all these other characters have. Anyway, that's me.
I agree, Ben.
Maybe we could start talking about that because I think it is this really interesting thing where using the medium of English, so many of these characters are really like able to express themselves maybe more freely using a second language. And I was wondering what you guys thought about this thing that I guess Hong has been doing this a lot in his career, but I think like, yeah, getting to the point quicker with another language.
Yeah, I know that hugest barrier for me in a certain way to an even greater appreciation of Hong is the fact that I don't speak Korean. Like from what I know from the people I know who speak Korean who watch his films, his way of writing dialogue, his way of his actors delivering dialogue is sort of, it's not the most natural. Like it's there's always a certain like halting quality to it. And for this, of course, like it accentuates that a lot. So I would say that because of having to conform your thoughts to what you want to express in Hong, it's like these are often very sensitive emotions. Like they're expressed in a certain way, like oftentimes more bluntly, or like you're not able to say something that you really want to in the way that you would ordinarily do so. And I think that something that I always forget is that you never actually hear Mori speak Japanese. You have a few snatches of voiceover, which is not necessarily tied to what he wrote in the letter. You know, sometimes it's much more clearly stuff that's in the letter, sometimes it's not. But even in those, it's still in English. That really fascinates me. And it accounts for, I think this is probably at this point, probably the funniest Hong for me. And I think that it is just, without putting it indelicately, it is funny to hear people speak in this particular way. And what I like about it is that it doesn't feel self-conscious. Though they might not feel the most comfortable in English, they're not trying to avoid it. They just want to get out what they want to say. And the fact that it's being done so in a normal conversation adds on this other layer.
Yeah, I like that idea that, I mean, characters do speak bluntly in Hong's other movies, but sometimes they have an indirect way about things. Like I'm thinking in this one about the gesture of the cafe owner bringing cake to Mori as like a sort of indirect flirtatious gesture. And then I think her boyfriend who's sitting at the next table is like, what about me? I get cake, right?
So funny, like her audacity to do it right in front of him as well.
Yeah.
That's what I found so funny.
There is that very Hong-like dance between indirect and direct here. But some of those conversations in English felt unique from his other ones for their emotional directness and the like broader philosophical directness of like the thing that he says about looking at trees and flowers, the thing that he says about time. It was like a looking through a different lens at some of his themes because the language is different and a little bit more direct.
Whenever I think about films about characters connecting in a third language where it's like neither of their first languages, I always think about the sequence from EE where the Japanese man, they have to converse in English. And I think I always love films that do this because I think what it shows you is that when you do that, when you converse in a language in which both people are not proficient, what happens is that you are forced into directness because you only know the most direct language. You don't know the most maybe like indirect or like polite way of saying things indirectly. So you only know how to say exactly what you mean and what you feel. And I feel that in this as well. Like, I think when Mori talks about like looking at flowers and trees, it's a very halting thing, yes, but like there's something innocent about it. Like he's almost like a child telling you exactly how he feels without being able, because he doesn't have the facility of the language, to couch it in a maturity. He's just like, yeah, it's just like this. Like I look at a plant and like, I feel good. That's basically what he's saying.
Or the teachers at the school are dishonest.
Yeah. Like he can only say like the most obvious thing. And then Youngsun also like speaks in a very like strange way where like very direct, but also sometimes using very big words for English. Like when she says like, oh, my boyfriend, he doesn't have a conscience.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about it where it's like, I know this person would not use this language if not for the fact that Hong wrote this into the script. There's something almost like artificial about the way that she speaks. And yet I think maybe there's a certain kind of endearing quality to it where it's like endearing not in terms of the character, but in terms of the actress playing this character, where she probably wouldn't be able to speak in this way because there's something a bit artificial about the scripting. It just doesn't feel quite natural. But then even so, it feels very plain and like direct. I feel like a certain warmth towards the actors all doing this, even though it's probably kind of uncomfortable for all of them.
You know, another kind of international dynamic that was playing in the back of my mind during this movie is the history of Japan and Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And all the conversations about Japanese people and Korean people as a whole, and the history of colonization and cruelty, how that gets pushed and pulled like taffy in this movie.
Yoon Yoo-jung's character says, like, I like Japanese people, like 2 times in this movie. And she repeats the same thing. What is
nice
like they're
and polite.
They're nice and polite.
Mori's like, there's only so much value to that, basically.
You guys know the title Hill of Freedom is Japanese.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, right. It's a Japanese cafe.
I looked up the poster for the Japanese film because it's playing right now in a little program for Sang-soo.
Oh.
And the Japanese title is Jiyu ga Oka de, which is different from Hill of Freedom because Jiyu ga Oka means Hill of Freedom, but the extra de means at the Hill of Freedom, like in the Hill of Freedom, which is a reference to the cafe, which is named the Hill of Freedom, but it's actually a reference to a neighborhood somewhere, I'm not very sure where, which is like a fancy upscale neighborhood, which is like maybe like somewhat European leaning in terms of its aesthetic and vibe. And so it's really interesting that like the Japanese man goes to Korea and goes into this cafe that's named after a Japanese place. And that Japanese place is also kind of influenced by a European sensibility. Of course, the Japanese man will find connection in a cafe named after a Japanese place. Because like I think there's a sense of like, for both Mori, maybe there's a fetishization of Korean women. And then for the Korean woman, there's a fetishization of like Japanese men. Maybe fetishization is the wrong word, but like there's like a fascination with like somewhat more exotic culture that's a bit different from your own.
And even a reduction sometimes.
Yeah, like there's an undercurrent of that. Like then there's a question of like, how much can you really connect with them when you don't even speak each other's language? Like how real is this connection? Or is it like because of its foreignness, it is enticing?
Yeah, I would say that for me, one of Hong's great preoccupations is the contrast between like a character's assumptions about another character and what they're actually like. And this especially applies to categories that the character and sometimes the viewer puts on another character, and how and the ways in which that shifts over the course of the film. And I think that even his approach to structure or his approach to a different form of narrative than a standard one, I think that is invoked there too. So I think that having this sort of national categories is another addition onto that preoccupation. I think it's definitely worth noting that the neighborhood that this takes place in is the same one that's in The Day He Arrives. It's also Bukjong. And I think that's in that film, it's used more explicitly as this sort of much more ancient, or like, it's not quite as modernized. And so it has a lot more of traditional sorts of architecture, traditional sorts of places. And I think that definitely plays into, Eli, your point about, these historical ties and often fractious nature of Japanese-Korean relations. I went to Seoul 2 years ago to do some sightseeing in Bukchong and Hong sightseeing in general. And I did go to the Hill of Freedom, but it has been remodeled. So the interior is pretty different. But from the outside, you can, if you know what the Hill of Freedom looks like in this film, like you can still see it. Different colors and different interior, but it is still there, at least in terms of the building, which I was pleased about.
Wilson, you know what that makes me think of?
Chungking Express
Midnight
Express turned into a damn 7-Eleven.
Yeah,
That's what I'm thinking
there.
about.
I never got to see that, unfortunately.
Whenever you're in Hong Kong, Ryan, I'll bring you to the infamous 7-Eleven.
Yeah, I've been the last time I was in Hong Kong was probably like 12 years ago or something.
Wow.
But I can confirm that, speaking of EE, the apartment building where they stay it looks the same.
It looks exactly the same.
I've been there.
Yeah.
We were there last year, Wilson.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we were.
Maybe that's our next business venture. We need to do like director sightseeing tours.
Yeah.
It's like cinephile pilgrimages across Asia.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, the Vive l'Amour Park is pretty close to the apartment building.
Sorry, Vive l'Amour sidebar. They I think end of last year, which is 2024. Coming out 2026. They did that whole Vive l'Amour cry.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
Ridiculous.
I was very, very amused by that.
Yeah.
I mean, all three of them were there. It looked quite fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I heard about it from them because they were in Singapore telling us about this. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So funny. Oh my gosh.
Could cry, go bowling with a melon, spit in someone's mouth.
Do all of it.
You know who would be pro cinematic pilgrimage though? Pope Leo.
Oh, here we go. We're here.
Pope.
Sorry, Ryan, you mentioned the structure. So I think now is a good time to talk about the structure. We haven't talked about it really in terms of its effect and how it works.
Mm-hmm.
For me, an interesting, inciting question is what happens if this film didn't have that kind of shuffle structure? Would the film be very different?
I've thought about it sometimes in terms of if I was able to try to fashion a more clear chronology. It's sort of a little bit beside the point. What it accomplishes in terms of the film is to act as the sort of unmooring of Mori, of us, of the viewer from necessary cause and effects. After the shuffle, it's very clear the first one that's presented is Young-sun thanking Mori, taking him out to dinner for finding her dog, and then the second one is him finding the dog. So it's very clear, from immediately, that it's not going to follow a traditional idea. And I think that what that accomplishes is that unmooring allows you to absorb more the feeling, the sensation of being in another country, of being in this unfamiliar place, getting to know people, getting to know what can sometimes be destabilizing surroundings. It's kind of clear he's visited this neighborhood before, and he's been here with Sin Hua's character, but because he's not without a guide, he's finding out, experiencing it through his own eyes rather than perhaps through hers. It gives things a whole different light. And this sort of plays in, it's one of the more obvious ideas that I've inherited or stolen from Evan and from Sean is that, like, in some ways, I think that it's almost more productive to think of Hong in relation to Jacques Rivette. He's not necessarily cited him as an influence as far as I know, but to me, he's a key inheritor of Rivette's sense of play, of the way in which, especially reality, can alter and shift around, like within the confines of a more definable reality similar to ours. And I think that the chronological structure is a great way of accomplishing that. It just shifts things and you don't quite find your footing. But because of the mood, which is even more of a hangout than usual for Hong, it allows you to really key in on that.
The other thing that the non-chronological order does for me is it keeps us closer to Kwan's experience of this story. Whereas something like Night and Day, it is also episodic and broken into chunks by date. That's very much so the male character's movie, and we're with him. But there's an automatic distancing from Mori in Hill of Freedom because we're getting his story out of order, and the interstitial is Kwan shuffling to the next letter, her hands often just moving to the next letter. It makes me think about her, it reminds me of her experience of reading these letters and how unsavory it must be.
She's kind of the audience surrogate because we are watching the film like the way that she's reading the letters, I guess.
Yes, our experiences are very much so parallel.
Even though she doesn't have like a huge like temporal presence in the film, like, but she's always felt, because we are engaging with the scenes in much the same way that she is, I guess, which is interesting.
It would be like in Grand Budapest Hotel, the first layer of the story, which you only see at the very beginning and very end, is the girl reading the book on the bench. Like, our experience is closest to hers, but I forget that in the runtime of that movie. It's interesting to be reminded throughout the movie of Kwan's active reading and getting the story in the order that we are.
Another 2014 masterpiece.
True,
Yes.
good point.
Of course.
Both the same year.
I think for me, thinking about the shuffling, it's like, this is not the first time Hong actually like fucks with like temporality, but in a way it foregrounds the fact that he's doing it. And I think maybe as like maybe a entry point into Hong, it tells you that he does this. You know, he's almost like saying, I'm about to do this. And I think when I watched the film, even though like you can see it, like he's also not even that direct with explaining what is happening. It's like, oh, yeah, there's this shuffle, but like if you don't read the synopsis of the film, you might not understand the shuffle immediately until you realize one of these things is happening out of order, right? And then like you might not necessarily make the connection of like, oh, the out of order is actually related to dropping of the letters, because like it's not that immediately apparent, I would say. He's not so explicit with explaining his MO with the film, like what he's trying to do with the narrative structure. I think about like a more like recent Hong, like Walk Up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Walk Up I find also like has a very interesting structure, but that one even less so primes you for what it's doing. It just does it, and you're like, wait, something is really, really off with the temporality as well as the fixity of the characters. Like something's really off, you know?
And he's also playing, like in Walk Up, he's playing with the spatial nature. Like he's like space and time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess in a way, by mixing it up, I think like you said, Ryan, like it releases us from thinking about cause and effect. And like we can only vibe with the film and like the different scenes. Like him and the guy that's the professor or something. It's just like hanging out, or him and Yun Yun Jung just like chatting. And then I think thinking about it as a travel film, I guess, something like similar to like Another Country or like Claire's Camera. There's like I think by mixing it up, it reflects a certain traveling feeling in which like time starts to melt together, and like because situations just have more impact on your memory. Because like some days of your trip is like, oh, this is like peak experience, and some days of your trip you're like, I'm kind of bored, and then like it kind of becomes a sort of nostalgic lens into this time that he's spending in Korea without knowing what he's doing. Also something that resonates with me right now.
I mean, this is another Romarian thing. But his films are often about traveling in the specific states of mind that can put you in.
Yeah.
In traveling within Korea as well by Korean characters, and like he mentions Jeju Island like a lot, and it feels very pointed in terms of like experiencing this thing that's outside of your normal day-to-day life. But I think that also one of the brilliant things about Hill of Freedom is the way because Mori is very dedicated to cataloging his days, it captures the mundanity within vacation, and it captures the fact that he sleeps a lot, which speaking relatable, that is something that at certain points in my life, sleep schedules have gone very out of hand. And so I do greatly appreciate that. So I do think that Mori is probably one of the most relatable Hong protagonists, and that's just one of many things.
Yeah, I do find like there's such an endearing quality to Mori that I don't really feel with a lot of Hong male protagonists. Like I do think maybe there's like sort of that lack of real nastiness from this guy with his sort of interactions with women. And I do really enjoy seeing him on screen, and like I'm just like happy that life is going like decently for him. Like he's sort of like going through life, whereas in other Hong films, like the men sort of like get their comeuppance in different ways, and you're like, oh yeah, it's fun watching him, or like funny to watch him suffer a little bit. But I think the placement of Mori is interesting in Hong's career, also as someone that is like not a creative, but everyone tells him, oh, you look like an artist, but he's like, no, I'm unemployed. It's a bit of a swerve from what he usually does. And I think Ryo Kase, who is great in this, and also like we've talked about To the Ends of the Earth before, and it's like as the cameraman is really great in that as well. I think he just delivers a really performance that you can really relate to, or like character that you can really relate to as an audience member.
Wilson, what you're saying is making me think about how the more overt misogyny, which I mentioned in one of the first things I said in reaction to this movie, does not come from Mori. In fact, we're invited to laugh at his slip up in sleeping with the cafe owner again through that hard cut. But the misogyny is most certainly more offloaded to Sang-won, who harasses the young woman staying at his aunt's inn, and then has that whole, to borrow the parlance of Gen Z, crash out.
Yeah. She's a bitch. She's a bitch.
Which is so pathetic and has that nastiness, which I think is a well-chosen word. And one of the interesting things there in terms of comeuppance that happens because of the non-chronological nature of this narrative is after that argument, Sang-won speculates there must be something going on with her. It must be something with cancer or with a man. Oh, it's got to be with a man. Later on, or really earlier on in the timeline, but later on in the runtime of the movie, we learn that Sang-won is in massive debt, has no money, is living with his aunt as a freeloader, and he's the one who has these, frankly, emasculating problems. So it's like his comeuppance is something that preexists in his life in a way that he assumed about the young woman who he was yelling at. So it's in a weird kind of elliptical, interesting riff on the crummy Hong male character, who I think mercifully is not the lead character of this movie.
I think Mori is interesting because usually the male characters that Hong writes are not so self-aware. But Mori is actually extremely self-aware. Like, the few moments of voiceover is very self-critical voiceover, where he's like, oh, you're such a coward. Or like when he sleeps with the cafe owner and then he like kind of like chides himself for like fucking up things with Kwon for sleeping with it. So like, very unusual. You compare him with the protagonist of Night and Day. Like, that guy's just like, I'm sleeping with everyone because I just want to.
Yeah, comparing those two, it's like night and day.
Exactly. And like, Mori is sweet because I don't even know if he's making mistakes, but like, he is thinking a lot about what he's doing and like the consequences of his actions and like what kind of person that he wants to be. He is a very self-aware male character, despite his kind of like, I don't know, somewhat despondent state. He's very self-aware and he's thinking about what he's feeling, which most of the men in Hong movies have feelings, but they don't know what they're feeling. They're just angry or drunk. Yeah, I'm trying to think of another Mori in the filmography I've seen, and I can't think of anyone.
No, in terms of like just the character, or
Yeah, like in terms of like this kind of like self-aware male character, which I'm like, maybe there isn't one.
I think that there are characters that Hong treats in a similar way. Actually, to go back to Walk Up, I think that like there's a certain. I don't think that he doesn't externalize it in quite the same way, but I think that especially in the journey that he goes on, I think that there's shades of that. I haven't rewatched it yet. It is like a film that I felt extremely strongly about, and like I backpedaled a little bit, but it was because it has a certain more deliberate callback to this middle period, which is still my favorite period, and within the rhythms of his more recent work. So I think maybe that's part of what I felt about it. Yeah, I don't know. I think that you could even see a little bit in Right Now Wrong Then. You could see like in terms of his more overt relationship between the two parts, and the relationship between the Jung's character in the way that his character shifts over those two parts. I think that you could see a little bit of that. I don't know if it necessarily winds up in the same register, but I think that there's elements of that. I think that even Yourself and Yours, there's a little bit of that too, in terms of how
a little bit,
how he learns from the course of the film. Ultimately speaking.
I have a question for you, Ryan. So you've been doing this Notarized project where at like the start of every write-up of each film, you sort of like list down like all like sort of like the recurring things, that the Hongyan things that are happening, like what sort of like alcohol they drink, or what are they eating, like how many drinking scenes or how many dream sequences. And I'm like wondering, like through the course of doing this for quite a big chunk of Hong's filmography so far, what things do you feel like you've gleaned from sort of making a tabulation of these things?
Well, I should first say that, just to give a brief history of how it came together, like I think it was just something that I had been thinking about for like a couple of months before I started. And it was an excuse to rewatch the films. I'd seen them all once before, at least once before, some of them much more than that. But, especially for the early ones, I hadn't seen them for 3 or 4 years. Originally, it was actually purely just to do the tabulations. I didn't have the concept of writing about the films extensively in my mind. And some of the categories came along the way. I think I added a few categories after a number of films. I had no plans to keep track of the number of shots or number of zooms until I think I was maybe a few minutes into the first entry, into David Pickfall Into the Well. I thought, maybe I should try to keep track of it, especially because it operates formally a lot more similarly to a regular, film, for lack of a better word. And I thought it'd be interesting to track that. So I went back, I started again. I tried to keep track as best I could for all these. I used a legal pad. I used tally marks. And that one, especially because there were over 200 shots. It was very, I have no clue how accurate that is. Actually, when I was rewatching Hill of Freedom just now, it was a split-second shot that I completely forgot about, that I wonder if my count is accurate. I'm pretty sure it is accurate, but I would want to go back just to check.
Which one was it? What shot was it?
So after Kwon goes into the cafe, there's a split-second shot of not Musuri, but another worker there on her laptop. I just completely forgot about that shot. It's been 3 years since I watched the film. But then as I started to, partly to track my own thoughts, is why I started writing about them. And then also to note connections and things I had forgotten about. So, connections with future Hong films. I'm very proud of the project. There's a reason it's still a pinned tweet on Twitter, just because I think that it sort of gets at a lot of of my own sort of critical of my own sort of cinephilic practice. I've been meaning to get back to it for a long while. I stopped at Women Who Ran because that was the last film that was available on Blu-ray at the time. Because, Introduction, which was the next film, hadn't come out yet from Cinema Guild. And so I wanted to wait until then. And then it's been 4 or 5 Blu-rays since then. I haven't gone back to it quite yet. But a lot of it was the fact that I did all this in a very compressed time span. I think I was doing an entry every couple days or so.
Wow.
Yeah. And let's see. So the first one was March 7th. The last one Who Ran was June 2nd. So it was all within
Wow.
within a month. And that was very deliberate, partly because I wanted to sustain the momentum. It might have been partly to celebrate being done with finals, but it felt like a good time to do so. And it really just, it helped me prime my mind to recall connections more readily speaking. It's like I doubt I would have the time to rewatch all these before I did some additions with the films I haven't gotten to yet. I think that Dennis said this as well in the Film Comment live podcast that he recorded, like where like every Hong for me improves or it gains on something different on a rewatch. There's an additional part in my understanding. And I would say that that's probably the most significant thing, is just the fact of appreciating each individual Hong film. But I would also say that I think that another key thing for me is that it only sort of further establishes for me that I think that people, not unfairly, but they tend to sort of simplify things, or they tend to focus on certain recurring things while ignoring other ones. The most obvious one for me, of course, is soju, because there are many of the films that where there's no soju at all, or very little soju, and like there's other predominant alcohols, for instance. So I think another one is like people way overstate how central film workers are to his to
That's
his,
true.
Yeah, like there are plenty of them where they're not the main characters, or if they're featured at all. So these things that I mentioned, they are important to his work, and they can have a very strong effect on the way in which a specific film, whether it be Right Now Run Then, whether it be Tale Cinema, plays out. But it's not always the case. I think that's the main thing. I think Hill of Freedom's a good example of that.
Yeah, the main alcohol in this is wine, which I found unusual.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely some wine films.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that. I don't know if it's one of the films with less drinking. There's a decent amount of drinking, but it's not.
There's drinking, yeah.
Yeah. He should be rebranded. He should not be a soju director. He should be a makgeolli director.
Well, that's what he drinks now.
Yes, I love makgeolli. So
Makgeolli.
is my Korean alcohol of choice.
I mean, I love makgeolli as well. I mean, like, for a while, he wasn't drinking at all because of health problems. But I think that Dennis said that now he drinks makgeolli some. Yeah. I've not been able to verify this in person, though.
I wonder if we could attribute the like shift in era in his filmmaking to when he stopped and restarted drinking.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think that I would say that the health problems that he had around 2019 or so, I mean, ongoing, but especially 2019 or so, definitely had a similar effect on me.
It's like when rappers' discographies change because they sober up.
Yeah.
Like I was like learning about Danny Brown sobering up and whether that changes music.
I mean, definitely with someone like Abel Ferrara, who I think that's like, even though I haven't seen like Tommaso or films like that, but I think that he's someone that you could put in the same sort of conversation, making these very personal, very direct representations, not necessarily putting himself in it. Sometimes that happens, but again, less than I think that people tend to say. But I think that this sort of very personal, very direct invocation of your vision, the way you see the world onto film.
Yeah. Maybe we should do Ferrara.
That's a good idea.
Maybe. Okay, before we close out this conversation, I do want to talk about this dual ending that we are presented with here, where what is presented to us is basically, I think Mori is, we see Kwon sort of finish reading the letters and go to the hostel and sort of catch Mori right before he leaves. And we get this really epilogue type narration from Mori where he says, we found each other and then we had 2 kids and our daughter is really strong and big, which he used to describe Korean women earlier in the film, which I thought was such a sweet moment. And I when watching it, I totally forgot that it was sort of your classic Hong dream boom wake up moment in the film. And when that happened, I was like, no.
I had a very similar experience, Wilson, where that dreamier ending was happening. I was like, this is nothing like a Hong ending. What is going on? And then he wakes up and I was like, there's Hong. That's Hong. That's the Hong I know.
But I think the other reality that we're presented where he's sort of like still having this on and off thing with Young-sun and sort of like joins her at the end is still not too bad. Like I feel like both options aren't terrible options, which is interesting because I feel like in other Hong films you get presented with a really nice option and then like a horrible ending. So it is like sort of like a choose your own adventure type thing, maybe, but also I feel content with what I'm presented with at the end, and I'm happy with whatever is the truth.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I find the ending to be quite bittersweet because I think I feel like a passage of time has passed in that dream sequence and his relationship with Yong-soo, that the tone of the relationship has already changed when she wakes up in his guest house and like has a cigarette in. Like she rushes off and like it doesn't feel like she's as enamored with him as she was in the beginning.
Yeah. She puts out her cigarette in his cup.
Yeah. And then I think ending the film in this moment in which he's in the guest house gives the film a sort of Sisyphean vibe where he will wait for Kwon forever. Like that is the vibe I get from that ending.
I agree, Ben. He's stuck, and like I said at the top of the episode, stuck on this aspect of the past.
It's fucking real, bro.
And also, this is the only time, maybe those couple moments of voiceover that Ryan mentioned notwithstanding, the only time that we get Mori's experience unfiltered through the writing of a letter. So it feels like a bit more pessimistic of an ending.
Yeah.
To me than a happy one. Sorry.
Maybe I'm still riding off of that high of that previous ending, you know,
or from having just run a marathon.
Well, yeah, could be one or the other. Yeah.
I mean, for me, like I do actually view it positively, like in large part because I do also prefer the first ending. But I think that the way that the second ending is able to preserve a certain mystery about itself, especially because like you could also like I could see it equally as the first ending being a dream, but I could also see this second ending as being another thing that happened within the chronology, within the previously established chronology.
The missing letter.
It could be the missing letter. Yeah, exactly. Like I think that like it left it open enough for me where I can see it as being as another free-floating element within before Mori and Kwon reunites.
Yeah, I buy that.
Yeah. So I think that I'm able to, maybe it's a justification, but you know, partly because I do love the romance that Mori and Nielsen have, that like it works for me on both levels. So I don't view it negatively, I guess.
Yeah, and he does, like in that earlier ending, he does have a flight to catch where he doesn't seem to be like rushing out in that second ending to like go back to Japan.
The thing about that first ending is that when it was happening, along with being like, this is nothing like Hong, I was like, what about Yosun? You know, is she going to be left behind like the woman in France in Night and Day? So there is something nice about the ending where she gets to walk away out of the frame of her own volition rather than get rejected by Mori.
Yeah.
I'm honestly fascinated by the idea of like making a chronological cut as best as you can do. Like, I think it would be such an interesting, like a Soderbergh-esque experiment.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, what if I cut this? And like, I could be tempted to do this.
Like Memento Mori, if you will.
Well, I know, Ryan, you're like notorious for cutting films together. I know you cut together a Black Hat director's cut, so maybe that could be a project.
I mean, that was really the only one, but I mean, I am also proud of that. But that one, I just did it purely using the TV broadcast of the director's cut. You know, just putting in as much blurry footage as possible. You know, just to like, you know, just for as little revisionist as possible, just to make it look good, basically. So yeah. I don't know if I would necessarily want to make the chronological cut of this. I guess you know, I guess I have done other little projects on the side, but nothing really as significant as the director's cut approximation.
Well, so as you said, Ryan, that exercise I think would be nothing more than an exercise, because the point is the out of order chronology and the effect
Yeah.
that creates emotionally. It would be like cutting open the butterfly.
I think the dissection could be instructive. Like, could tell you like what's actually happening with like the way that it's out of order, you know?
Yeah, but yeah, also like I completely forgot, for instance, that all of the full-on romance is between Mori and Yunsun is in the second half. It builds in a very specific way that's kept mysterious by the structure and by orienting yourself within it. It also has its own logic, emotional logic, that's very well developed within the way it plays out.
Well, I will say now, since this episode's going to come out in like, I don't know, 4 months at this point, that if I do a chronological cut, there will be a link in the description. There will
Ben,
be.
you're drunk. You're not going to do that.
How hard can it be? It's not going to be that difficult. I'll think about it.
Actually, yeah. I mean, like if I wanted to do it, I feel like I could do it within a day.
Yeah, I think it's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you can track, like, you buy the shirt that Mori is wearing. I think you can sort of like piece together what happens on the same day, like even like the small things.
Also, bro's traveling. He's probably wearing the same shit every day anyway. So it's like,
Oh, I know.
yeah, like, I mean, I've been doing that.
That's true. That's true.
You're recording on a washing machine.
Oh yeah, I've been washing my clothes and wearing them again and again.
Is there anything else that anybody wants to say before we close out this episode?
No, I mean, just like in terms of the actors, Real Kase, like it is. He does really have just such an amazing filmography over the past 15 years. You know, like you mentioned, To the Ends of the Earth, but he's also in Silence. He's in Kiarostami's Like Someone Love. He's in a film I really love called The Works and Days of Tayako Shiojiri in the Shiotani Basin, which is an 8-hour film that's in many ways sort of like a film's recreation of character's life over the past year. And he's in it, and he's the only like really clear actor in it, but it punctures the film in a very interesting way. He's only in for like a few scenes, and he was in Kubi, the Takeshi Kitano film.
Wow.
Oh, the recent one, yeah.
Yeah, where he plays Oda Nobunaga. So yeah, like he's just such a fascinating actor to me. I love that the young, very tall woman is Haewon. I love that. Yeah.
Yes, she's nobody. Yes, she is.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That only hit me now.
Yeah. And like these are the only 2 Hong films she's actually been in, but I do love her. She brings a very interesting energy to both of these films. I don't think we mentioned the dog that much either. The dog's so great.
Oh my God. The stupidest looking dog.
Yeah. Probably his best dog. Like he's been in a very strong cat
phase. Yes.
Yeah. And the cats have been amazing. I do love this dog. And Giju Bong, I love that he pops up, especially because he's short relative to...
Yeah, his daughter that's so tall.
Yes. Yeah, it is a really great cast of characters here, and I think they all play very memorable characters as well.
Seo Young-hwa is always a favorite, within Hong for me as well.
Yeah. A lot of nice faces to see reoccurring.
That brings me all the way back to the start, Ryan, when you were talking about how Hong's filmography, in addition to creating a community of actors and characters who have shown up in his movies, how it's been a structuring element for you and your professional and personal life. That really immediately, when you said it, resonated with how I feel about my friendship with Ben and Wilson and how their love and knowledge inspired my own and led to this, and hopefully extends out to our listeners as well. I think Hong epitomizes that in a really unique way across this huge filmography.
It's so sweet. And this is probably going to be... We're going to take a little pause on Hong after this one. So it was a very extended series on this man. But I'm very... Thank you both. Also, thank you, Ryan, for joining
thank you, Ryan.
us on this Hong ride. You can find more of Ryan's writing, and specifically his Hong Sang-soo Notarized project, on his website, which is taipeimansions.com. I do want to ask one last thing. Why is it called Taipei Mansion?
basically like it's combined from two of my favorite films. Taipei, it's the setting of EE, and then Mansions from the Chungking Mansions, where Chungking Express is.
Oh.
So it's just from that. Very, very simple. I've used that naming convention for more obviously for other sites I've established, but yes, that one I established. I think it was basically when it started, which was 2016, I think, and I've kept it like that. It's been nice.
I love it.
Yeah,
because it's like Chungking Mansion, like the Mansions part of Chungking Mansion is not even in Chungking Express, so it's like a deep cut within a
Right. Yeah, and like the words made sense together, so I just went with it.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to Deep Cut. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to help others discover the show. A great way to support us is to leave a review or comment on our episodes directly on Spotify. If you want to chat with us and other fans of Deep Cut, come join our Discord server where we talk about movies, TV, music, and share what we're up to. We also have a Patreon if you'd like to support us with a monthly subscription. Thank you to all our Patreon supporters, and a very special thanks to our Patreon Deep Cut Pick supporters, Leah Lai and Nicholas Gao. You can keep up with Deep Cut on Instagram, Letterboxd, and X at Deep Cut Pod. Click the link in our description or go to deepcutpod.com to find links to everything we've mentioned here. Deep Cut is hosted and produced by us, Wilson Lai, Benjamin Yap, and Eli Sands. Our cover art is designed by Justina Yam, and our theme song is composed by the one and only Eli Sands. I'm Wilson.
I'm Ben.
I'm Eli.
I'm Ryan.
Take care, and we're looking forward to talking about more movies with you next time.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
Awesome.
This is a
Thank
great
you, Ryan.
conversation.
Oh, of course. You're welcome. Thank you for having me.